Hi, everyone, and welcome to Elevate Your Life on Dr. T TV. I'm Dr. T, and this is the place where emotionally sensitive people get the emotional tools that they need to succeed. With me today is Lacey Johnson, and I'm going to read a little bit of her bio here and let you all know what an amazing guest we have on today. So, Lacey is an award-winning essayist, editor, and journalist. She has worked with a broad range of authors, celebrities, and spiritual thought leaders, including Deepak Chopra, Daymond John, who I love, and Gabrielle Berstein. She founded The Wonder Report in 2018, and her words can be read in a variety of print and digital media sources, including Cosmopolitan, Marie Claire, Pop Sugar, the Oprah magazine, and others, many of which have been syndicated by Apple News, MSN, and Yahoo millions of times. With a deep intrigue for human beings and a fiery passion for smacking her readers right in the face with thought-provoking truths, she writes and reports boldly and introspectively about topics that challenge the status quo. In the realms of relationships, mental health, pop culture, women's issues, and the nuances of self-optimization and wellness. She is also deep in the process of authoring 2 books, one that is a conscious and gutsy exploration of the illusions of fame, power, and success, all told through the narratives involving some of the people the world most idolizes, and another that unpacks her surprising evolution through pregnancy and new motherhood. Stacy, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Lacey,
Lacey, welcome to the show.
okay.
I got so immersed in your bio, Lacey.
Which, by the way, sounds way cooler when someone else is reading it versus when you're actually living it.
Well, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help that I was just chatting with my friend Stacy. So, Lacey, I'm so glad to have you on. I am so excited to get into it and all that you are up to in the world.
Thanks. I'm honored to be here with you today.
So I don't even know where I want to start, but I do want to get a sense of sort of a bit about your journey to become someone that is living this life of getting to write these amazing things and share such a range of perspective and information with people, on so many different topics, mental health and fame and all of that. So share with us a bit about your journey to where you got to, how it's been to where you got to now.
Well, let's see. I encountered a lot of, had a really intense childhood from a very loving family, but I encountered a lot of trauma early on. I had a traumatic experience when I was 6 years old, and I think that sort of like led me, I was sort of immersed in trauma. And so I think that sort of like planted a seed for me to just be perpetually curious about what makes people function well and what makes people function poorly. And I don't think I knew that at the time, that I just had this like fascination and curiosity about that. But I always knew that I loved writing. I loved storytelling. And so I went to college, majored in journalism, and I just had a passion to, had a deep curiosity about humans and what made them tick, what made them wake up, what sparks humans, what compels them to, come from a place of despair and getting it together, like what is in the space between that. So I had a lot of, and through my own struggles, I think that I sort of became a little bit of an expert on mental health without being an actual mental health professional. So it was a really natural progression. When I did begin to, when I did become a journalist, I was kind of started out writing a lot of personal essays and all the things that I wrote about, in terms of that kind of touched on relationships and relationship health and sort of like self-help realm. It really spoke to people a lot. And I became a journalist and found myself an editor for a business-minded, business-geared magazine. And I started interviewing a lot of really successful, famous people. And what was interesting about that is it was sort of this really interesting marriage between this passion about mental health, passion about, optimization of self, and then meeting all these people who by public perception have it all together. But what I found is that there is absolutely no immunization from the human experience. And every single person that I have ever interviewed, no matter multimillionaire, some of the most idolized people in the world, they show up every day and they have to process their emotions. They show up every day and they have to deal with their inner demons. They show up every day and they are not immune to feeling things that are uncomfortable or having problems or struggles. And so I think that just sort of fueled me to do what I do now, which is I do write a lot of mental health geared and relationships. I still do a lot of relationship stuff for Oprah Magazine and for Pop Sugar and some women's wellness stuff recently for Marie Claire. But I'm authoring 2 books and I'm really excited about that.
Lacey, I really relate to what you're saying about, being connected with high profile people and people who have all the resources and are really, in positions that so many people are aspiring to. So much of the population is aspiring to the high profile status and the fame and what is implied in that, right? Which is the immunity from pain. Right. And or just the aspiration for wealth as if it is an immunity for pain. And so I really relate to this because having started my career as a psychologist right off the bat, working with people who were in that same realm that you're talking about, people who had come through a luxury treatment center, addiction treatment center, and then had wanted to work with me because I had met them there. It's really something because I recognized how much shame they had over the fact that they felt that because they'd achieved some level of success, that first of all, they should be immune, and that by being unwell in some way, that they didn't even have they felt wrong about having problems, let alone getting help for them. And there was all this shame and guilt because they should be okay, right? And so is that something that you encountered in them as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think society does us all a disservice by, I'm sure you hear, like, even in this, what we're in right now, which we're in a global pandemic, and our lives there's been like this unearthing of so many things, and we're in a state of upheaval and uncertainty. And I hear so often when I have conversations, whether it's, I'm interviewing someone for a story or even just talking with a friend or a family member, everyone always has to preface, well, I know so many people have it so much better than I do, so I don't really have a right to feel this way. Yes, you do.
Right.
Yes, you do. We don't have to live our lives from this place of like constantly comparing, and we should absolutely own what we feel. And there's no shame in whatever you have, whatever you've acquired, whether that's fame, money, success, whether you have this beautiful, supportive family, gorgeous house. Owning your feelings is essential, and you don't have to apologize, right? I mean, I think sometimes we forget that we don't have to apologize or feel weird about having a bad day or being scared, or, you know what I mean? And I do find that a lot. And what's one thing that's really, it's always kind of stuck with me in the past, I guess it was about 2-3 years ago. 2.5 years ago, I interviewed Daymond for a magazine story. He's so lovely and so authentic. And so many things that he said to me in our interview, I folded them inside of myself and I pulled them out all the time because he's so brilliant. But one thing he said was, he was very candid about some of the struggles that he'd had in his life. He had a failed marriage. He said that he struggled a lot, feeling like he had failed his 2 daughters, his older daughters. He'd had, made some career mistakes and come back from them. And he had a cancer experience. And he said that he remembers one day he was in LA and he encountered some paparazzi, and somebody said, hey man, what's it like to have millions and millions of dollars now? I think it was after FUBU had really taken off.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, well, it feels exactly like it felt before. And they were like, huh, well, I'd love to have my problems, I'd love to have millions of dollars with my problems. And he said that on that day, he was having a really bad day. He was having, struggling with a lot of stuff. And that he said, well, yeah, I mean, you can ride into your problems in a brand new Bugatti, but you still got problems. If it's stage 4 cancer, if the one person that you love more than anything in the world is dying, if your heart's broken, there is no immunization from that, no matter where you are, no matter what you've acquired, and definitely no matter what the public perception of you is.
This is such an important topic because I see how people are, like idolizing celebrities and aspiring and building, and using that and really using that to propel them, which can be very productive in a lot of ways. And then also I see in society the way then there's this expectation that people who have a higher profile and have some influence and some resources, right, that then they're held to a standard that is like, they're dehumanized in a way, mm-hmm. right, that they're not supposed to have these issues. And when they have them, sometimes people are compassionate, and sometimes people are really frustrated and upset and really angry about it and judgmental. And what I kind of notice about this is that I think it's really scary for people to look up to all these higher profile people and then see them being fully human, right? And that kind of scares people into, well, okay, if they're having all of this and this is how bad it is for them, what does that mean for me? And so I think there's a lot of discomfort that comes from that, but I also think it's a really important time that's going on where people are coming forth and speaking out about their journey through their struggles. And I think that is changing the landscape now, which I think is a great improvement. Is that something that you are noticing and have a sense of?
Oh God, yeah. I think there are a lot of illusions being shattered right now, just all over the place. And I think that's what a lot of putting celebrities up on a pedestal and idolizing them. I think that's where a lot of that is just all about illusion, because I think it kind of goes along with this mindset that when I have this, I'll be okay. When I lose the weight, I'll be okay. When I meet the partner, when I have the baby, when I get that accolade, when I finish that, my master's, whatever, we think that, and it's just not true. And I think that that's why it can be devastating when you see that the celebrity who, they may have so many things that you aspire to be or aspire to have, and seeing that they too have problems, that can be a bit disheartening, because it's like, well, where's the hope for me? But I think the hope is that we have to allow our illusions to be completely shattered and know that it's never going to be that way. The beauty is not in, there's never a destination in life where you're never going to have problems again. We have to link arms with that knowing. We have to shake hands with that now, mm-hmm. because we can spare ourselves a lot of pain and disappointment. There's always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be struggles. There's always going to be some level, a conflict is going to arise. And I think the beauty is in not the avoidance of those things, because that's not even possible. It's in what you do with that, finding the possibility within whatever you encounter, whatever you will inevitably encounter, Yeah.
Well, I love this too, because, again, earlier in my career, when it worked out that my career trajectory had me working with people who were originally going through a rehab that I worked in, struggling in the rehab because they also were needing to do this with 30 other people, right? Who then it had a whole certain kind of not ideal experience for them. And then when they would come into my practice, I would check in with myself at times. It's like, okay, this feels very purposeful, what I'm doing here and who I'm helping, and what they're able to do when they're able to process their emotions very productively and stop being so reactive and including all the way through, you know, addictive processes, because their influence is so great that when they are doing better, then that's a bigger resonating effect. And I felt really comfortable in that. And I've also, you know, over the years gotten some flack, you know, as people do on social media, because I do help people that have a higher profile, which is not, it's not everyone that I help, but and I think to myself all the time, this is so importantly purposeful, because we don't in this country have like other countries where there's royalty and those kinds of role models to look up to. And these are the people that have garnered some level of success. And so when they're emotionally stable, my sense is that creates a greater emotional stability in all of the people that are following and that they're leading through life, you know, with their influence. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, you said a couple things. I may segue a little bit.
Yeah.
You mentioned influence and you mentioned social media. And, you know, I've written a lot about the psychological effects of social media, how it has, there is evidence that it has increased the suicide rate among young people. And I feel very passionate about the subject because I feel like there's never been a time in history where humans have had so much information, so much media just hurled at them at all hours of the day. And there's so much media, but it's filtered media on social media. And, you know, because of the fact that I write for a lot of very prominent media sources, I do get a lot of, even though I don't have or like nurture a big following, I have no desire to be an influencer or any of that. So I take that very seriously. I don't want, you know, I get a lot of emails about being in, you know, influencer campaigns. I get a lot of offers just because of the fact that I write for bigger, you know, platforms. Not that I am, but I write for them. And I have no interest. I have no interest in that because I feel like I would be selling out. And that's not to knock anyone else who's doing that if that's their journey. But for me, I feel like with social media, we're all on stage. There's these moments that are so staged. And recently, you know, I have a little girl. I have a 16-month-old daughter, and there's something, you know, it's just been the most illuminating, stupefying, gorgeous experience of my life. You know, it's just wonderful though, and so many nuances of emotions, but just absolutely the most edifying responsibility under the sky. And it's precious to me. And, you know, recently I saw, it was a couple months ago, I saw in my Instagram feed a mom and a daughter in matching pajamas, big gun lighting, lit up beautifully, even glossy hair, like strategically placed over her cheekbone, candle flickering nearby, you know, a throw blanket strategically placed, perfect backdrop, perfect, you know. And it was so staged, and it was like, she was smiling like tenderly, and it wasn't an ad, it was like her actual daughter. And so I'm reading through it, and you guessed it, there was some swipe up like code and link or whatever, and I was like, who are we living for anymore? Like, you know, she was trying to get, there was like a code, and then there was also an invitation to vote for her for something. And I'm like, there's such a race to influence, to have influence. And it's I would rather have impact. Because I feel like influence, it's fleeting. This whole influence trend, there's no real sustenance. And I think that in the moment, it's creating this illusion, this shadow of connection, but it's actually not the real thing, and it cannot sustain you. And I think that it's actually robbing us of truly sustenant connection and authenticity. And there's this whole movement to be real on social media, but even a lot of those attempts to like be real, it's in a setting that's staged, and it's still packaged, and it's not that raw human connection. And there's still like some purpose behind it, some, you know, beyond
I absolutely get
Yeah.
that.
And I feel like that's so detrimental because as much as I know that, and as much as, you know, even I found myself in moments, if I'm having a bad day, a bad week, comparing myself to something that I know is
Yeah.
not not real. It's staged. It's not. And I think we are so hungry for authenticity, and true, genuine, organic connection. So much. So I have a lot of feelings. I don't necessarily. I don't. I'm not knocking social media. I think social media is a beautiful tool. I think there's been a lot of wonderful things that have resulted from social media and continue to. There's been a lot of wonderful things. I do think it's user error, though, as with anything. I mean, alcohol is not necessarily bad.
No,
Um,
right.
you know, it's not necessary. It's not bad, but we can user error. We can it can be perverted, I guess you could say. And I think a lot of that has come in with this whole movement of influence. Influence. I was out to dinner around Christmas time with one of my best girlfriends, and she was like, "I want to ask that girl." We were in like a hotel lobby. We'd gone up and had some drinks, and she said, "Let's get that girl to, or let's get somebody to take a picture of us by the tree." And I'm like, "Cool, let's do it." And there was this girl over there, and one of them, she goes, "Oh, I take the best pictures here." And I'm like, "Cool, okay." And she goes, "Well, here you." She goes, "You look so hot." She's like, "I'm gonna make you an influencer." And the first thing I go, "What if I don't want to be?"
Wow.
You know?
That is
and,
fascinating.
and I'm like that. And I thought that was so interesting that there's this assumption now that everyone wants to do that. But what
Or
are we
should. Yeah, or
influencing?
should. Yeah.
What impact? What are we doing? What are we doing? What is influence? It's like we're tossing around this whole validate me, validate me, validate me, and there's no fruit in that. There's no healing in that. There's no presence in that. You know what I mean?
Lacey, you're really speaking my language, because for so long, I mean, the way that I was able to develop myself through a traumatic childhood, which was very similarly in the way that I had a lot of people that loved me. We were very, very fortunate in a lot of ways, but it was a highly volatile and reactive. It was a group of people that were traumatized from past, tragedies and things like that. And so when you said, your childhood was intense, I'm like, this is so my girl, because that's exactly how I describe it. It was intense. And then I was a very sensitive child. So I was observing, and like you, I really got this sense of similarity here, in that I was just sort of kind of puzzled, going like, okay, this seems like people are making this a lot harder than it is to be a person, the way they're describing things and the way they're reacting to things. It seems, not super, that they're missing some skills that they need for life. And so I didn't gain the skills that they didn't have. And so developing myself through being an emotionally sensitive person and really becoming just, epically good at processing my emotions and being able to be present and be intentional, the biggest part of it has been about creating a relationship with myself and having self-connection that goes on as a consistent way of being, right? So that you're not like sometimes intentional and connected, and then sometimes you realize hours have gone by and you dropped out of all connectivity with yourself. And so in this era, and also I'll say, and having wrote a book that is almost entirely about how to actually mechanically create a connection with yourself and other people, I feel the same way, in that the millions, billions, trillions of stimulus that is now in the atmosphere, that we are all now connected to, we are all now processing it, that all of this externalizing of ourselves is furthering an issue that was already there, which was that we have not really made it a super cultural priority to develop emotionally from the youngest age and kind of have an emotional self-connection education. And this is just, I mean, it doesn't shock me that the numbers, you said suicide, we went to from the top We were the lowest of suicides about 10 years ago, and now have the most suicides now. And the numbers for anxiety, depression, addiction, we have more health information and more sickness in the atmosphere in people now. So that really resonates, that really connects to what you're saying. It's not working for us.
I just have to say this really fast, because this is the kind of thing that makes my body buzz, because it's so beautiful to me. I love that you say that you share. I actually did not know that about you. I didn't know that you had a traumatic childhood, and that you mentioned how you had a lot of people who were not processing emotions well at all. And I love that you made that observation from a young age, and that you went on to become an expert and an activist and an enthusiast for emotional strength and emotional intelligence, because what that is, that can be applied, that lesson, that decision, actually that decision can be applied to so many things, because in everything in life, and I think this is what so much of emotional intelligence boils down to, or it's like one of the fundamentals. Every single thing that you are faced with in this life, you can choose to be a victim of that. You can choose to let that govern you, or you can choose to go the other way and say, I had this experience that was negative. What is the possibility in this? And that's what you did. That's what you did. Rather than becoming a victim, not that you didn't have struggles,
Sure,
probably continue to, that's inevitable. But that you identified that weakness, whether the inability to, or the poor habits of processing emotions, and you decided to search for possibility within that. And I just love that so much.
Well, and Lacey, think about this. I remember being a kid, and here's what I know about emotionally sensitive people who have a lot of intuitiveness from the youngest age, whether they realize that or not, and know, and they feel so much. And even though I know that is like an amazing superpower, it's just a capacity that people have in certain ranges. It also, while it was more intense than maybe someone else would experience, or as we know, sometimes another sibling experiences something less intensely than another, but that also gave me, and people, it gives, I want to say to my emotionally sensitive audience, it gives us also the ability to be so aware of things. And to your point, Lacey, we can be aware and also know that it's painful, and recognize that might be the very reason we are on this planet, to create solutions around that, rather than, as to your point, that it's just the bad cards were dealt, and it's the bad hand, and that's my life's trajectory and my identity. I think that people are coming to this planet in experiences that are about, if they had a self-connection from the youngest of ages, they would be able to start solving problems and living their purpose from the time they were little, and in their developmental stages. And so absolutely, I not only sought the process out, I sought the solution. I thought to myself, I don't know if anybody knows it, because I'm going to therapy and stuff as a teenager, and I wasn't still sure how to process emotions. And I thought, there are other little girls like me. When I was a little girl, I thought there are other little girls and boys who parents are good people and they don't know how to manage their emotions. And so this really has been a life's passion for me, because it is the foundation of everything that we do all day, every day.
And emotions, that is so good. That's just great stuff. It's so profound. And you were talking, emotions are everything. All parts of ourselves like bleed into the other. So the emotional self is the physical self, is the mental self, is the spiritual self. I had an experience, and I've shared this in a few other interviews, and I'll never stop sharing it. And I'm putting it in my book as well, because it's one of the many things that has just kind of taken me to a new dimension of living. But my husband and I experienced 4 years of unexplained infertility. And I was extremely healthy. My blood work looked great. Everything looked phenomenal. My doctor couldn't figure out why we weren't getting pregnant, but they're like, but sometimes there are just reasons that could, maybe something's wrong with your eggs or whatever. And I intuitively just was like, no, I don't know what's going on, but I know that my body can do this, but there is something, I'm stuck. There's something going on. And I was offered, they were like, well, you don't technically need fertility treatments, but do you want to go that route? And I didn't want to go that route. I think, I'm not saying that people shouldn't. I know that some people have to, and I totally honor that. But for me personally, I just felt like that wasn't my solution. And I realized, and I just say this because this may be triggering to some people, what I'm about to talk about, and I'll just say it very briefly because I want to be delicate with anyone listening. But a couple of things had happened. You know, I lost my mother. My mother died very tragically when I was 6 years old, and I grew up without her. And I think I had a lot of abandonment issues from that. Maybe some resentment that I hadn't dealt with. I resented her for dying, you know? And so when I was in my 20s, I was in a very, very, very negative, very abusive, really emotionally abusive relationship. And I had an unwanted pregnancy, and I terminated the pregnancy very early on. And so when I got married and was ready to start a family a few years into my marriage, it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening. And it was so disheartening. It was so defeating. I mean, I felt so left out. I felt so unwanted by every baby that could ever inhabit the planet. Like, it was so devastating to my life. And I was just really hurled myself into work as much as possible. Well, I went to see an acupuncturist during this time because I was working a lot, and I was having like some stiffness in my neck from long hours sitting at the computer. I'm sure you know what that's about.
Oh yeah.
And what was really interesting is it was the second appointment that I had. I felt this is very interesting. She was like, well, I feel like there's some energy around in your womb. It's almost like and I didn't tell her anything. There's some type of like sorrow or regret. This is really strange. And so that there was that. And then I went back the second time, and in the midst of the acupuncture session, I had a totally like a mystical experience almost. I had an emotional release. It literally emotional release. Yeah. And I felt something like almost like pop or move. And it was almost like, not in a literal sense, but something just popped up and said hello and was like, do you believe you deserve to be a mother? And I realized through tending to my physical that I had stored the emotion in my body of unworthiness and guilt. And I'm not kidding you. I processed that day. That was June 7th, 2018, and July 18th, I was standing in my bathroom holding a positive pregnancy test in my hand. And
okay.
This is not even about like pregnancy or any of that. This is about...
It's about emotions.
It's about emotions. Yeah. And the way that we hinder ourselves, the way we hold ourselves back, physically, mentally, whether it could be in a relationship that you desire, a career goal, a money goal, financial goal, getting out of debt. You know, there's so many, and I believe that it starts, I think that our emotions govern it. Our emotions
are everything.
Yes.
They are everything.
The high priestess.
Well, and again, you can see why, you know, I'll share that over the years of doing this work, you know, even in the earliest days of like going through internship and residency, and I was shifting because I had been a corporate trainer, and I'd always been working on, I'd always been doing it to some degree, helping people in a job focus on their outcomes rather than just, you know, their negative thoughts about their work or something like that. And really working on just helping people be high performance and build self-efficacy with themselves. And as I was making this shift and knowing that, let's get real, Tracy, you're always basically doing a therapy session, so let's go ahead and become one. You know, that's basically what I recognize. And I was willing, I was building such a connection with myself that I was like, I'm following that navigation. Like, there's nothing else that would make sense than to follow what it is that I'm internally understanding about myself. And as I went into it and I was thinking about what specialty and stuff that I was going to do, having had anxiety, depression, ADD, all the things that all the symptoms of emotional sensitivity and autoimmune disorder. And I mean, I had a major eating disorder when I was young, which was just, you know, it was how I coped with life. And my family had struggled with addiction, and I just knew, I thought, I'm going to go into the addiction industry first, because I don't even think it's about this beverage or these drugs. I know it is about the underlying emotions and the way that people are holding them and reacting to them. And nobody's processing them, because it's not normative in a family for people to process their emotions. They will yell them because that's somehow acceptable, but they won't necessarily process them. They don't necessarily know how, nor do their family members know how to support that. Mm-hmm. And I just thought to myself, no matter what specialty this looks like, it looks like addiction recovery, but it is really emotional strengthening.
Yes.
And it's been a beautiful path, because it's meant, Lacey, that every single thing that a person was struggling with that had them self-medicating in any way was able to be dealt with in an empowering way when you actively process your emotions, and you do that as a form of self-care and self-empowerment. And so this has led so many clients, including my first client, me, to be free from all the symptoms, because I can just get down with dealing with the actual internal experience and working it through for myself so that I can stay connected and be focused. And you are absolutely right that the grief piece, there was all the emotions. I feel like the world has been in grief for centuries, and it still doesn't know how to process it. And it manifests in all kinds of disease. And so what I want everybody to know from what you just shared as well is that there's a lot in the industry telling us that it's all about these physical symptoms, and if you fix those, that will fix everything. And I'm here to tell you, and so is Lacey, that really invest in your emotional well-being. No matter what anybody says about emotions, it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
To understand them, and then look how you were able to you were able to basically heal yourself.
It was the most empowering experience of my life, and it has fueled me. It has empowered me. And that's what's so interesting. I think that we avoid our emotions because we don't want to be weak, but it's actually the opposite. Yeah. You own those emotions, you are like a freaking badass. Like
you are. No.
That's where
you are. Everybody, I want you to hear that. You are a badass, because you know, I'll just take something, and I really relate to you in this, Stacey, Lacey. Sorry, this is my best friend is Stacey. But I grew up next to someone named Lacey, so that's helping me. And you're just a beautiful person to be connected to. I'm loving this conversation, Lacey, and that you were talking about, you know, your mom passing when you were 6, and just for everybody to understand, the way emotions work is that when they are not processed by whomever is experiencing them, then they get carried on, and they remain until they get attention. And so
neural pathways in the brain, you know,
they're there. Yeah. We can pretend like we don't need to face something. Mm-hmm. And we know it feels like it's really deep and scary, because it is big, but it is also going to be a big result. And when I think back in my childhood, where my dad and his brothers had their dad was killed at 3 and their stepdad at 6. And so this is tragic.
So it's very formative.
Terrible. Nobody processed these emotions. And so I even could tell at like 14, I was like, I am basically with a bunch of people who look very successful, but they are all in grief from years and years ago. And what happens is that if they're not processed by the person that's dealing with them and feeling them, then all of us in the atmosphere end up experiencing them because they're needing attention. And then we all end up sharing these negative or very difficult emotions, when there is a beautiful intimacy about being with your own emotions and gently and intentionally and really beautifully guiding yourself through what they are. Yeah. and pulling out all of the beautiful, powerful nuggets that are there. And it is powerful. You're harnessing the power of the sadness into what you're going to do to make it, do something wonderful in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think emotional intelligence, I think that it's about, I think that it's about the bravery and the willingness to acknowledge and process whatever comes up, but to not be governed by whatever comes
I
up.
love it.
And not be puppeteered by it, because I think it's sitting with it. It's the willingness to own what is your story, what the things that you've been through, but to not be puppeteered by those things. I love what you were talking about, because I saw two very this was a very defining experience for me as a child. We actually had a family tragedy. My mother, my two aunts, and my grandmother all died in our family visit. There was a fire. And so my two uncles lost their wives. My dad lost his wife, his sister-in-law, and mother. My grandfather lost his daughters-in-law and wife. So it was just this huge tragedy. But I saw really firsthand the willingness to process grief, the willingness to process tragedy, upheaval, disorientation, all of the things that come with it, that you are not an event that happens to you. You are the event plus your reaction to that event. That's your life. And I saw radically different outcomes for different people. I saw radically different outcomes based upon choices and the willingness to acknowledge and process what came up as a result. And yeah, I mean, it is so powerful. It is so powerful. And I also think that that's why a lot of people are suffering. There's been a lot of people who have broken their sobriety in this pandemic and quarantine, because our distractions so many of them have been eliminated. And you know what I mean? And
yeah, the coping tools. The
ability to just hop on a plane and go to, Aruba, or go meet a friend for, happy hour, or, go to the pool, or, what have you. Just so many of our distractions, or just to, maybe you're in a relationship or a marriage or whatever that's not great. And the ability to just take a breather, that so much of that has been eliminated. And I think that's all really, so addiction is just creating distraction in order to avoid what is.
Well, and I'll add on to that to say, I couldn't agree more. And I'll add on to that to say that the way that I see what happens is that, again, we aren't culturally equipped on the whole, right? Some people more than others. And then it's not a part of our cultural conditioning from an early stage to give an emotional foundation to people. We don't do it in schools. We're not really giving them a foundation of health in that way. And so it's kind of left up to, like, when something bad happens and you can no longer stand it, now we're going to try to go fix it. But instead of having the ability to navigate our own experiences from the earliest of ages in a way that's practical and simple, and anybody at 5 or 95 can do, we are experiencing so much everyday PTSD that goes on, depending on how sensitive somebody is, depending on what happens in their life, and the emotional resources and other kinds of resources in their family and their community. There's so much intensity, and without the ability to be with oneself, observe it, and as you said, there's you in the reaction. And that's why I love about doing emotional training with people, because in its simplicity, it is about the awareness and connection to yourself, and being able to notice and say, oh my gosh, that is a super ouch right now. And I love what you're saying. You don't have to be governed by it. I'm going to absolutely be using that, Lacey. Thank you so much for that gift. You don't have to be governed by it, ruled by it, by all of these reactions, which then end up going into reactive drinking or reactive eating or reactive traveling, right? Or reactive texting. And there's a way, and I've done this a lot with processing my dad's recent passing, where you can truly, as if you were, somebody was there with you, a friend was there with you, you can truly observe the emotions with just enough space to not be completely and totally impacted by them, but to give them their attention and awareness. Because something like grief is often about how much you loved somebody or love them.
There's beauty in it.
And it's beautiful. And you can pull that through and pull yourself through in a way that isn't like, I just have to sit in this pain until it kind of passes. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about ushering the experience through and kind of integrating it into your life and taking the pieces of it forward that you want to do and utilize, and taking the expertise that you're gaining from it.
Definitely.
Right? And does that sound like what you're essentially doing, Lacey?
Yeah, I think that so much of my work is driven by the fact that I experienced a lot of pain and trauma early on. I made a lot of poor decisions in my youngest years as a result of those. I had a lot of abandonment issues, so I would, subconsciously choose very possessive, controlling partners, and I think it's because I knew they wouldn't leave me.
Right.
I didn't know that I was doing that, and so I made a lot of decisions that caused myself harm, and when I had a paradigm shift, I actually stumbled upon some of Bruce Lipton's work, who I just think I love him so much. And it changed my life. My life completely changed in the span of a year, I'd say. And everything else was the same. The only thing that changed was my mind and my decision to have different emotional responses. And it completely changed my whole entire life was different, but I had the same face, had the same family, same feet, same brain, same heart, same history, but my life was completely different. And in that space, I really learned that no matter what happens to you in life, and no matter what poor choices you've made in your life, you can always reach for possibility and transform your pain into power. You really can use your pain for your power. And I feel like I do that. I think that the things that I have been through have made me more powerful because I'm more empathetic. I can, connect with people. I'm compassionate and I feel my work. I take it all very seriously because I know the contrast between joy and hopelessness and all of those things. And so I take it very seriously when I champion work that I know is going to speak to someone's self, their relation, the health of their relationships, the health of the relationship they have with themselves, their mental health, their emotional health. And I feel like that's what you've done too, which is what I just love so much, because the space between the have and the have not, it is so powerful, and you really just anchored that, and now you are taking the misfortunes in your life and the things that hurt you as a child, and you're using it as just a freaking powerful weapon, against dysfunction, and you're handing people the key to empower themselves.
I really appreciate you saying that, Lacey. I consider it everybody's most important work in life, no matter what everybody's different purposes are, which I think are so deeply embedded in us, and we're all here to contribute and bring the expertise of our unique self forth in the different things that we do in any facets. And yet what I recognize is that the emotional foundation of everybody is supporting everything that they do, everything on this planet, every way that we interact with people. And there's a real invitation here because, emotionally sensitive people they've felt throughout most of history have felt really badly about themselves because life can feel more intense and overwhelming. And in reality, they're able to be so aware of so much. And it's such an incredible gift. And it's important to the world that all of you emotionally sensitive people who recognize how intuitive you are and how much you are aware of, that even when that can be really overwhelming, because it can be very overstimulating, that you know that by working directly with your own connection with yourself, that you'll be able to take all of that and channel it into so many different aspects of your life and bring that forth, rather than having just the feeling of like life is happening to you and you're kind of surviving it. And so I really think it's so important for emotionally sensitive people to step into their power by processing their emotions, by being willing to become experts at the fact that they are more, if you're more emotional, all the more reason to become more of an expert about what that is and how it works and what you can do with it. And Lacey, you've brought so much today to our audience, and I'm absolutely loving this, because it's a testament to how, however we develop as a society through our emotional processing capabilities, and be it, you know, in the field that you're in and the way that you are elevating our society by the essays and the articles that you do. Because some people, you know, they're not comfortable learning it going into therapy. So writers like you are so essential to our development as a society, because people will take it in a little bit more if they're reading an article than feeling maybe they won't go in to get help. So I really encourage everybody to really check out Lacey Johnson's work and all of her essays and this incredible Wonder Report that she has out, which I believe you can go to is it the Wonder Report?
Yes, that is
so let's
something
talk about that.
Yeah, so that sort of came about as a result of writing for a ton of other publications. Marie Claire, Cosmopolitan, Oprah Magazine, Pop Sugar, and loving it so much. And then I thought, well, I would just like to create something where I can write a lot of newsy narratives, because people really connect with story. The storytelling is very powerful, but so is reporting and bringing evidence-based information as a journalist. So I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do it from a place of searching for possibility, for the wonder in a situation, as opposed to the doom-filled narratives and the negativity and the fear. And because I feel like there is a lot of that in journalism.
It sells, unfortunately. Yeah, it sells. Yeah.
And I wanted to create something that was impactful and that was real. It's not just like, not to knock bloggers, but that's not just like a blog, that is curated by a journalist and a person who
yes, a writer. Yeah.
Search-based information and in-depth interviewing and things like that. But from a point, through a lens of what's the possibility in this? What is the power in this? Where's the wonder to be found in this? Where's the magic in this? So yeah, I haven't been able to devote as much to give it what I want to give it, just because I'm so busy writing books, and I'm writing for a lot of other publications. But I do have some plans in the next year of adding some staff and getting to a place once my books are behind me, and adding, there's a lot of content there already, but really taking it to the next level.
Okay, so I want everybody to check out the Wonder Report, and the name in itself just makes you feel good, right?
Because thanks.
There's so much beautiful things to discover in life when we build a connection with ourselves, and when we make the study of ourselves a really primary thing in life, and the study of life and how it can be fun. And this is very important to me as well. And I really want you all to check this out, the Wonder Report, because that is a part of the challenge with emotional efficacy. And I think in this culture is that it looks like gloom and doom, rather than it's like one of the coolest, hippest, awesomest, most enjoyable things to become so aware and in the wonder of it all rather than just dealing with it all, right? There's the wonder of it all, and Lacey really brings that forth in the Wonder Report. And so everybody knows, when can we expect the books and where can we find them?
Next year, hopefully they will be at any Amazon, any bookstore. Hopefully we'll be able to go to bookstores freely.
Right.
But I also have LaceyJohnson.com is my website, my author website, where I have a lot of links from various publications that I write for, and I'm sure the books will be available there too.
Okay, great. And now, Lacey, before we wrap, one last question that I always do on this show is just to ask you, for our whole audience to know, and yeah, to have you share with us that, if this somehow were the last day on earth that you had, and you were here to give us a message, and this is a message that people would carry on as your contribution in their life, and that this would be the thing that would add into their repertoire to help them on their journey, what would that be?
I would say you are by far the most fascinating, most gorgeous, most magical, most infinite project that you will ever work on in your entire life. The hand that you've been dealt, the things that you've been through in your life, many of them may not be your fault, but they are your responsibility. And you have two options. You can be puppeteered and jerked around and victimized by all of those negative things, or you can govern your life. You can govern yourself, and you can see the possibility and the purpose in that. So see yourself for the infinitely powerful and fascinating and interesting project that you are, and govern yourself.
Lacey, wow. Thank you.
It's what I would say. It's really what I would say.
Thank you for that gift. And as we wrap, everyone, I just invite all of you to continue to grow in your emotional strength and awareness and connection with yourself. Know that you can stop reacting and being puppeteered, as Lacey has shared with us. I love that. You can harness all of these emotions and all of this energy and all of your experience, and you can really elevate your life. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care.